Well, it's actually Friday, boys and gals.
once.
And you know what that means? Tier List Fridays! Ranged in the raid. Now, that has a nice ring to it. We did melee.
We should rename the series Ranged in the Raid.
Yeah, Ranged in the Raid. Well, a lot of people were asking for this since we've done a lot of like Mythic Plus TLFs, and it was about time since like we have conclusions for Race to Will first. In most cases, we have Echo winning, and we have Limit over there as well. Method is still like working on it. But hey, we're gonna have to talk about this. And listen, we're not looking only at Race to Will first. We're actually taking a big chunk of data from like all over the places, similar to how we did with Melee.
Yeah, we try to be a little bit impartial and to be able to have some you know, non-bias here. We're kind of looking at what numbers are present, and this has been recorded ahead of time from when you're watching it, and we know. But the thing is, things change so quickly on a daily basis that it's kind of really hard to make a consistent series that's gonna stay that way. So even though we've recorded this ahead of time, by the time you're actually watching this, it's likely that even if we did record it on the same day, in 2 days it's gonna be different anyway, because actually not everybody's progressing through Mythic at the same rate. Tier pieces are given to specs in a different manner depending on the guild. For
Guilds
instance,
have different rules for this as well. So do take this tier list with a grain of salt. It's still gonna be a couple of I would say months until we get like a clearer picture. But it's always interesting to see how these rankings evolve, right? So there's a big chance that by the time you see this, a lot of these specs will look different. But hey, that's the cool part of it, right? Because we're gonna observe the transformation of the raid meta in terms of range. Let's talk about Affliction Warlock. And Affliction Warlock, I say, is a very respectable spec here. Not as much as a Mythic Plus, but
well, I mean,
really good here.
We've seen it in the Mythic Plus scenario. Affliction Warlock being really down at the bottom, and right now it's kind of into B tier. And although we kind of went through this in the melee tier list, we can probably caveat it again. The tiers themselves kind of mean something different this time around because it's very early into the season, and B tier is kind of where the solid specs are, which is probably what you're going to see move up into A and S tier as things even out, because they're very solid. Obviously, people use them in the Race to World first. Although I don't know how many afflictions have been used, other specs here have definitely been used.
You're gonna see a couple of specs from the B tier that you've probably seen in a couple of compositions in Race to World first. But that being said, Affliction has been doing pretty great overall. We look at like the hero logs, we look at the mythic logs as well.
Right,
It's doing decent enough, at least. I would say leagues better than how it's doing in dungeons. So I think being in B is very solid. If you play Affliction,
a little bit of hope, a little bit of hope.
Yeah, it gives hope. Now, the Boomkins.
The Boomkin. Now this is a weird one, and it kind of actually is the reason why we're doing the tier list this week at the very least, in the way that we're doing them, is because in terms of actual numbers in the overall scene of things, Boomkin is also B tier with Affliction, and as we can probably know, they're probably a little bit better, but so far, probably the guilds that are using Boomkins to push the hardest haven't actually logged as many parses into Boomkins to push them ahead of Affliction. So this is kind of how it looks right now, and we will talk more about this in detail at the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. But Boomkin is actually really solid, and the fact that, let's say, in the average sense, it's very Affliction is kind of keeping up supposedly so far in numbers.
In terms of the data, you have seen Boomkins in a lot of the counts for Race to World first. So it's not a bad spec or whatever. This is why I had to mention that when we're looking at the specs ranked into B, these are solid specs, and most of them you've seen them in Race to World first. This doesn't mean that if they used it, it's the best. Not necessarily, but at least it gives you a hint that, maybe it's not trash. Maybe it has something going for it. So this is very solid.
And B tier is also one of the tiers where you kind of want to bring the class as well. I mean, we've seen Lorgok, the Burst, Boomkin in Echo do some pretty druidy cool things there with, dodgy mechanics and soaking stuff in bear and stuff like that. That was actually really cool. I kind of caught a couple of glimpses of it because I like Boomkin. So it's not just about the spec, it's also about the class, and seeing as how Boomkin is doing a little bit better than Feral, that's probably why you're gonna see more of it.
All right, well, let's talk about Arcane Mage over here, baby.
The rise, the new age, the tides.
All right, I love it, man. I love it. I feel bad because I kind of always love the Fire and Frost, but dude, Arcane Mage is raking face all over the place.
And it turns out, like, I don't know as much in raid, but I know that we play with a bunch of people that do arcane keys, pretty high level. And what I've been hearing is like arcane is one of the more complex specs. It's like kind of out there with
not easy.
outlaw.
Not
so
easy.
The meme of arcane bless, arcane bless, arcane bless, arcane barrage is kind of gone. So I don't know.
Long gone. But listen, in terms of like raw numbers and like you're looking at all across the board on all of the logs, this is an S tier spec, guys. It's just domination.
We've seen all of the top mages in the past, even in the race world first, even in our guilds, we have some really good mages. They're all playing Arcane right now. And yeah, Arcane is actually really good, but also the other two specs, we'll get to them.
Yeah, we'll get to them. Let's talk about Beast Mastery Hunter. Another respectable spec, but with very high competition with another.
And still even with the competition of Marksman, which is going to be there in a second, BM is actually holding it into B tier with the average.
With the solid boys. This is the solid part, okay? This is, play this, you're gonna be fine,
It's B for solid boys.
or, you know, this is the thing. You have like Beastmasters here, and I think they're doing a little bit better than Boomkins in terms of like overall stuff. I don't know about Affliction just yet because it's very early on, and I'm honestly, we cannot check like each individual player to see do they have the two piece on or the 4-set. A lot of them don't even have the 4-set. Do they have their best items yet? Not yet. So this is the thing. Right now, when we record this, like just judging at all the data, you can see BM Hunters doing like really great. However, there's a lot more logs on MM. This is just, you know, a hint, wink, okay?
That's the caveat. The Demonology caveat is putting it, the Demonology, all the way into A tier. And I mean, we
surprised? Not really. I was expecting it to be like S tier to be honest. But
it's actually the same here because we are looking at the, you know, where the most parses are, which is a lot more in Heroic than in Mythic. So I kind of expected, obviously, Demonology is the Warlock spec of choice this season, at least for now. Things might change, we don't know. I mean, it's slightly above Affliction, which is actually really good that Affliction is not at the bottom. But Demonology, I think A tier is also the tier where you actually see a noticeable spike in terms of performance as opposed to B tier. So the difference between A and B is bigger than B and C, for instance.
Oh, for sure. Now, in terms of like the damage, obviously, if you play a Warlock, you're going to be happy with almost all of the specs, except one, I would say. And that
Speaking of
the next that we're going to talk about, and this is Destruction Warlock.
This is...
What happened, man?
Dude,
what the hell happened
if you guys watched our melee tier list, we talked about Survival being the only bad spec. Now, it turns out that range have a lot more contestants for that spot, and one of them is Destro, and it's going all the way at the bottom, man.
Into D tier, man. Well, I guess
there's some at this point in terms of D. Like normally we kind of try to put a perspective like this. You can probably play anything, but D tier is just weird. I feel like D tier is just actually struggling in terms of numbers. Sure, you can clear some bosses, and obviously some of the specs have also gone into Mythic a little bit. So it's not like be all and all, you cannot really play it, but there's clearly a decent difference between D and the rest.
And this is the thing, right? Because you're looking at the D tier specs, and there's almost always another spec within that class that can do much better in terms of like pure numbers. So we'll just have to see. But I was really like, when we were looking at Destruction and Alpha and Beta, and you know, doing the podcast with Kalamazzi.
I mean, it had the good things from Shadowlands, but I think the numbers are just not there.
I think it's just a matter of pure tuning. What about Fire Mage?
Well,
same goddamn story.
They like to hold hands and make like a little circle and dance around the bonfire.
Yeah, because they like, you know, fires
and sing Kumbaya, and that's actually Fire Mage right now. It's probably a little
bit better than Destro, but again,
I guess it depends on what log you're looking at.
Yeah. So you're gonna see like a couple of logs in, I mean, a decent amount of logs in Heroic for Fire. Not that many on Mythic. And did we see any Fire Mage in Race to World first?
No, I don't know if they used it for a quirk or a specific farm or some splits or whatever. But it's just Arcane, man. Like the difference is night and day. You cannot.
It's huge. Again, same story here. Like the specs we're talking about in D tier, same story as Destro with Fire. The toolkit is there. You cannot talk about like major problems with.
The thing is, Fire is actually really fun,
and it's fun, yeah. But it's a performance thing. I guess sometimes when we do this tier list and we look at the numbers, like the actual performance, the DPS at the end of the fight or whatever, There's no way you can put Arcane and Fire in the same group.
DPS is D because of D tier, and also with D is deficient DPS, which also is where Frost goes.
Oh my God,
Frost is not much better.
I think Frost is the worst.
Right now, yeah, but I mean they're kind of all in the same boat. Whoever sinks first doesn't really matter because they're all going down at the bottom at this point, man.
This is it, guys. So we have the two other mage specs that are competing with Arcane, and Arcane is doing so good right now. It has so much damage. I think like it
outshines, it outscales. Everybody's playing Arcane. Not only are they not playing them, but the difference is way too big for it to just be a popularity issue. And I think Khadgar has something to do with it, man, because Khadgar was on the bench for too long.
Khadgar is back, and look at what do you know? Arcane Mage is up there swinging it. But yeah, Frost Mage, once again, I think we can talk about a couple of problems with its design. Not too many, but there's still, I know there's still some complaints with the toolkit.
I mean, we mentioned red. In terms of design, it doesn't really matter if the numbers are there, right? And it's just probably not that there.
So this is an example where, you know, there's still a couple of problems with the design, but also the performance, the DPS is just not there. And there's a clear difference between, let's say, the damage profile of a Fire and a Frost Mage when compared to, I don't know, even an Affliction Warlock, which says a lot. Not to trash Affliction Warlocks, we love Affliction Warlocks, but, you know, you cannot not observe the difference. Now, let's talk about a star of the show.
Dude, this is interesting because it definitely reminds us of the beginning of Shadowlands. At that time, though, Boomy was also up there with Marksman, but Marksman right now is the creme de la creme. Consistently, obviously, we look at different types of logs and data to kind of judge exactly where everything is, but wherever we look, Marksman is there. And we will caveat this a little bit more at the end. Marksman is also one of the only range specs that's actually keeping up with the top melee boys.
Yeah, as we mentioned in the melee raid tier list, melees are like, you know, dominating like all the comps. You're gonna see a lot of them. This is kind of how it is in all beginning of the expansions, first season and whatnot. Melees are raking, and Marksman is kind of there with them. So
even Roger Brown played Marksman. I don't know if he had any fights as BM because I haven't looked at the entire. I couldn't catch all the entire race. But Roger Brown is an avid BM player. He played BM when Survival was king, and he plays Survival there as well. But seeing him just go to Marksman just kind of clarifies, like, listen, Marksman is the shit.
It is. There's no joke.
The bee's knees.
If you're playing a Marksman, you're gonna have good times all across the board, no problemo. What about Devastation Evoker, Flame?
Devastation is a little bit weird. Obviously, I'm a main preservation, so I dabble into Devastation more than any other DPS spec. Devastation clearly has an issue with single target. It's all the way into B tier. It's where the solid specs are, and I think B tier is kind of they're good at one thing. For instance, from what I've observed so far, BM is good at AoE, but a little bit poor in single target, kind of similarly to Devastation as well. And I mean the AoE though.
Oh yeah,
AoE. You've seen our dev boys.
My God, yeah.
In AoE they just explode. So that's probably what the key, the attraction is to having a Devastation into your group is, you know, to actually explode everything that means AoE.
Yeah. Plus they have like the proper tools. If you're not gonna have preservation healers, you're definitely gonna want some Devastation just for that loveliness over there. They have a lot of good things to like save a couple of melees from here there. Well, do they have like they have the Bloodlust as well, if I'm not mistaken?
They have Bloodlust. They have the raid buff that shortens the cooldown on mobility,
speed, and that's really useful for melees, right? So this is the thing. When you're talking about having a couple of Devastations in your group, you're gonna have to, especially in Mythic progression, things like these, small things like this can go a long way, especially in this melee meta we're having right now. I think it's a very respectable.
It's good. I kind of foresee, obviously with other specs as well, but I kind of foresee some single target boss for Devastation, considering that it's their poster child for Dragonflight. So it's kind of like weird to have it really perform poorly in single target. So with that, obviously, we're going to see some bumps with other specs as well. But that's just how it is at the moment. All
right. Elemental Shaman, baby. And I've seen them boys raking face all over the place.
This is a little bit weird because...
Why, Flame?
Elemental Shaman, I mean, if we look at the numbers, it's actually ahead of Demo. And I don't know if that's actually true. But the numbers are what they are at the point of recording this video. So Elemental is top of the A tier.
Hey.
It's a smidge. A bigger smudge below S tier, but it's actually doing surprisingly well. And considering that enhancement is statistically in Mythic Plus and in Rage still better than Elemental being able to keep up with it, that's actually kind of cool because we see Boomy really far ahead of Feral, and stuff like that.
Yeah, no. The Elemental Shaman is basically that range spec that can deal well with everything, right? So you can talk about some specific specs that can do well on pure single target. You can talk about a Swiss Army knives, best of jack of all trades, all that. Elemental is doing great, and I've seen the Elementals in our guild when they're like, you know, especially when there's like big not big pools, like a big density of mobs, there's like competition between our Devastations and Elementals. They're raking it over there, man. So the profile, the DPS profile is very, very strong. And yeah, you can still see a lot of logs of Elemental Shamans. And as Flame mentioned, this is very cool because you have an enhancement there who's actually doing better than Elemental. Not by much, but still better. And it's a melee meta right now. I'm happy for the Elemental Shamans, man.
They're keeping up, man. They're keeping up.
This has been a consistent spec all throughout, and I don't see the big issues with it. It's respectable A tier. We're gonna talk about like the last rankings at the end of the video. We're getting close to, but first, last on the list, Shadow Priest.
So going into the only tier left.
Bring me some power infusion, and we're good to go.
The thing is, Shadow is kind of closing in on B tier. It's noticeably ahead of the specs in D tier.
Oh yeah.
But it's not a lot of people play Shadow, and I don't think Priest is maybe one of the most popular specs. People are playing, you know, maybe Discipline and Holy more than anything.
I would say a C tier, just based on the fact that we don't have enough like data to like see exactly how we can. So when we take like, okay, we take a BM Hunter, the number of locks we look at a BM Hunter or Affliction or Devastation, and the number of locks we look for
a little bit more popular
Shadow,
for
like,
sure.
Yeah, there's very like the difference is so big that we cannot really compare. The damage profile is decent enough. This is not to say like, you know, it's shit. We know there's a couple of issues with Shadow's design and a couple of bugs still with it. But we have to mention that in terms of like pure DPS, the difference we've seen between Shadow and the D tier specs, it's quite impactful. It's quite visible. So not quite comparing to, let's say, Devastation and Affliction, but maybe this is just because it's not as played and we don't have all
it's a controversial spec because the top Shadow people, Public being one of them, has been outspoken about the design of Shadow, and it's a little bit weird. And even though sometimes it seems like it's wrecking the numbers, it still feels a little bit off. And as opposed to Red, which we've criticized about its design, it doesn't seem like it's pulling those numbers yet. So
yeah. Okay. Now this is the final image we have based on all the data we gathered, like from the majority of heroic logs, because there you have the most logs. Okay.
Most parses,
most parses. We have a couple of logs from Mythic, but once again, a lot of these specs are not there yet. There's like specs with like 3 or 4 bosses like killed, and you know the parses from that. Plus we took a look at the Race to Will first compositions as well, and mixing all of these, we have this one. Now let's take a look at the actual Mythic progression, like the one that is not secret, it's public on Warcraft logs.
Yeah,
and it's
looking vastly different. I mean, you might notice that Arcane is actually in C tier, which was actually weird. We've been doing the tier list for quite a couple of years now, and I don't remember ever seeing a spike this big in terms of performance, because obviously we all know that Arcane is good, right?
Yeah.
But if you look at the pure performance numbers in Mythic progression as it is now, Arcane is really down low. Now, I would imagine, without actually consulting anybody, because we don't really have anybody to talk to about this, it's that the guilds that are using Arcane to push for Hall of Fame are not actually making their logs public. So it's really hard to see like the Arcanes that are wrecking the meters. And similar goes to, other specs as well. We kind of see Boomy a little bit higher, which makes sense for Boomy to be a little bit higher, but also BM and Affliction way lower, which probably makes some sense.
Well, I don't know. What you have to understand about this specific image right here is that these are basically the logs from guilds that are, like maybe your guild or our guild or whatever, not pushing for like, top 100 or top 500 or whatever. They're just public. And this is what they play, okay? This is like the comps and the parses that they have publicly shown, okay? So it's different in some capacity. Although, if like when we're gonna look at this, I don't know, in a month or 2 from now, you're probably gonna see all of those Arcane Mages being let loose, like about BMs and all of that, and yeah,
and in opposition we can see some consistency at the bottom end of the tier, where
and at the top with Bart's one.
Yeah, this could probably actually, when we look at the D tier, this could probably actually talk about maybe an actual issue when it comes to these particular 3 specs. Where even though we have more C tier specs now, the D tier is still with the exact same contestants, the same old culprits. So maybe that requires a little bit of look into.
Yeah, but as I've said at the beginning, take it with a grain of salt. Let me know what you think in the comments. What do you play in the raid? If you play in the raid, how is it working out for you? Where do you find yourself within the DPS charts with your guildies or whatever? Really cool and interesting to see how all of these will evolve. As always,
thank you, patrons, for supporting the content and being a part of the whole thing that goes on around Marcelian&Flame. We do a lot of stuff, and your support doesn't go unnoticed. It actually goes a long way into helping us be able to do this for you guys as often as we can. And if you, dear viewer, want to see this content more and you want to support us, want to be a part of this, the link is down below.
He says it so nice. Thank you for watching the video, guys. You have a great weekend ahead. Happy holidays still. New Year's coming around.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Bye. Bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.